Thank you so much, Dario. So it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you to the Mobile Ecosystem Forum for the kind invitation to be here and present on behalf of the Wireless Broadband Alliance. So I prepared a small presentation just to give you some background on who is WBA. So maybe some of you are familiar with the Alliance, but I think it's good just to give a quick recap and a quick overview of the WBA. And at the same time, I will bring some of the work of the Alliance on the areas of Wi-Fi 6 and 5G and how we in WBA we see these two technologies working together. Okay, without further delays, let's go through the agenda. So apart from the WBA overview, I want to talk about the complementary of these Wi-Fi 6 and 5G technologies. And then I want to deep dive with two examples of projects and work that we do in the Alliance, one on the Wi-Fi 6 trials and the other one in the OpenRoaming. That is one new initiative that we have in WBA. Okay, as Darius said, so WBA is the typical non-profit trade association. We have been around since 2003. We have this common vision that we want to drive this agenda of seamless and interoperable services for Wi-Fi, but always taking in consideration that Wi-Fi doesn't exist in isolation. So Wi-Fi normally is coexisting with other technologies and especially with the cellular technologies. Normally when we use Wi-Fi, either at our houses or office or outside our house, we normally have other technologies as well to be able to connect. We have basically around just over 100 members. We have a roadmap of programs and projects, and then we run a series of events and marketing and research activities as well. So if you have more curiosity about WBA, you can always visit our website. Just for you to have an idea who is behind this alliance. So you can see here is a mix of operators and technology providers. You can see as well the companies on our board of directors, so organizations like AT&T or British Telecom or Deutsche Telekom, alongside with Intel, Cisco, Google, are part of the board, and they drive many of our activities. As many other trade association bodies, we run a series of projects. This is our entire roadmap for 2020. I'm not going to do a deep dive on this slide, but I think it's good just to share with you that we work in different fronts, from next generation technologies for Wi-Fi, but as well the integration and the coexistence of 5G and Wi-Fi, and as well IoT, roaming, and testing and interoperability. I will talk later on my presentation about these two examples, so the Wi-Fi 6 trials that I mark here in red, and as well the OpenRoaming Federation. But let's move on and talk a little bit about Wi-Fi. So as you are probably aware, Wi-Fi has been evolving as a technology over the years. So you can see on this graphic the different generations of Wi-Fi. Last year in 2019, it was launched what is called Wi-Fi 6, or the 6th generation of Wi-Fi, using the old nomenclature is the 802.11ax standard, and it brings quite interesting new capabilities, both in terms of throughput, ability to manage a much higher number of devices, and ability to have a much better management of the traffic flows between the devices and the network. Important to share as well that on the Wi-Fi 6, there is this world trend to allocate more spectrum to Wi-Fi. It's called Wi-Fi 6E. That is to allocate some of the spectrum on the 6 gigahertz band to unlicensed technologies. Both US and UK already took some decisions to make this spectrum available. We at the Alliance will believe this is quite relevant. This will open up the door for many more new use cases, more innovation, more business opportunities for everyone. And you can see here some of our initial tests with our member Broadcom that will reach peak rates of 2.1 gigabytes per second, what starts to become a quite interesting speeds and throughput. So that's where I believe Wi-Fi is evolving as well, alongside the cellular technologies. And I believe there is a very good complementary between these two technologies, and that's what I want to talk about. Just to start to open up here some dialogue and some topics that we can discuss further on this webinar. So I believe there are bad and good news about Wi-Fi 6 and 5G for all of us as users, but as well for the enterprise and for the operators. Regarding bad news, so in my view, so 5G will not replace Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6 will not replace 5G. So if any of you were thinking that we'll have one technology that will dominate all the connectivity, I don't think that's the way that the industry will move on. And there are several reasons for that. So we have the devices. We all know that some devices are more cellular centric, some devices are more Wi-Fi centric. We have a very vast number of use cases and business models behind these technologies that will not work if we go all for one single technology. And as well, for example, even all our learnings with COVID-19 that show the importance to have robust broadband in our houses and be connected with Wi-Fi as a complement to our office. But there are very good news coming as well that I think for me, I want to reinforce this. So definitely Wi-Fi 6 will make Wi-Fi much better, and 5G will make our cellular experience much better. And that's what I want to discuss much more in depth on today's webinar. And we in the WBI, we come with this view that these two technologies, in fact, they should be the best friends, regardless if you are an operator, if you are an enterprise, and of course, all of us as users. I think we'll all benefit by having these two technologies working together in the best way possible. To reinforce these assumptions or these views, we have been doing some work as I shared before, on the 5G and Wi-Fi 6. This is a comparison of a series of criteria on both technologies. In fact, between three technologies, including LTE advanced. And my takeaway that I just want to reinforce on this chart is, in some of these criteria, as you can imagine, cellular technology will always win. So if we are talking about fast mobility, I always give the example, if you want to cover an highway with connectivity, you are not going to use Wi-Fi. You need to use a macro cellular type of technology. So 5G is the ideal technology for that. LTE is the ideal technology for that. And then we have the opposite. So if you want a very dense environment, indoor environment, Wi-Fi, it's a much more capable technology. Traditionally, it's much more economic to implement in a building and cover one building with Wi-Fi to provide connectivity. So this is where we come from, this perspective of we industry need to make sure that these two technologies work better together. And for that, I want to deep dive very quickly in two programs that we have. One is regarding Wi-Fi 6 global trials, where a group of our members have been developing field trials in real life environment to validate the capabilities of Wi-Fi 6. In some cases as a standalone technology, in some cases in conjunction with 5G. So you can see several of the use cases, including entertainment and sports stadiums, airports, residential, industrial, 4.0 and smart cities and other use cases. I wanted to just do a quick deep dive in one of these trials that focus on industrial 4.0. This trial, as you can see on this slide, was created together with this company that is called METTIS AEROSPACE. Is a UK-based company that works on the metal industry. So they produce very large metal pieces for different applications, but the airline industry is their main market. So they provide metal pieces for planes, so like planes from Airbus, from Boeing, to the engines of Rolls-Royce, and so on. So this company that we can say it's a traditional industry, so the metal forging, they decided to enter in a digitalization strategy. And that's where it came along, all these interesting type of technology. So they wanted to basically have all their different assets and machines talking to each other and be able to collect as maximum information they can to make much more productive decisions. And these are some of the use cases. I don't want to go in detail. You can see as well here on the picture. This is one of their presses. As you can see, it's a gigantic machine, and they have multiple sensors. They need to be connected, and they are looking to use cases like how to improve maintenance, how to reduce downtime of the machines, how to improve time to market and time to production with their suppliers, how they can apply technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality as part of their digitalization strategy, and many times support the maintenance teams or the supply management teams. Just for your curiosity, so we are in the middle of this trial. We are doing the real life production testing. There are some delays, as you can imagine, due to COVID-19 situation, but both the members of the alliance involved on this trial and the METTIS AEROSPACE are very pleased with the results that we achieved so far. So this is a good example on how Wi-Fi 6 can be part of a digitalization strategy. And we can even discuss further how can 5G, in fact, can be combined with Wi-Fi 6 in this case and many other cases, and bring that digital transformation to a reality. The next case that I want to talk about is slightly different. So it's related with how Wi-Fi is provided as a guest service. So I'm pretty sure that all of us here on this webinar, we already had some issues when we want to connect Wi-Fi outside our houses or outside our office. So when we go to one hotel or restaurant or a coffee shop, we always have one of these problems, if not all, at the same time. So we are never sure if we are secure or not. We never know if we are going to be able to connect with Wi-Fi. Once we are connected, we never know if the quality is going to be good or not. And we don't even know if the coverage has a good coverage and the capacity is appropriate. And normally, it's a very fragmented experience that provides, I can even say, a very frustration environment to all of us. So we love to change these yellow papers with passwords between ourselves, what to be honest is not the most secure thing to do, or we love to share passwords, is very common, and that in fact I already been in very large events where we have thousands and thousands of people sharing a password to connect to Wi-Fi, or even worse, there is no any type of security and the network is completely open. So that is quite common, and we try to solve this, but we try to solve it many times in isolation. So some networks, they ask all of us to register. Sometimes they ask us to use social media. Sometimes they give us passwords and usernames. Sometimes they require that we send and receive SMSs. We send a message somewhere and we receive an SMS. So a very fragmented and confusing experience. So what creates a very frustrating experience. And to solve this, our members, we have been working together to create what we call a global cloud roaming federation for the Wi-Fi. So making sure that there is an industry standard that can be applied by all Wi-Fi manufacturers on the networks, and all of us, we can have a credential that can be provided by multiple entities that we can connect in multiple networks, always on the same way and without manual intervention, and guaranteeing that we are in a secure environment. So that's the idea of this open roaming. And this is a first step, in our view, to bring and power up these opportunities of combining Wi-Fi 6 and 5G, because one of the ways is to combine some of the assets from the mobile operators into the Wi-Fi world. Open roaming, basically, on this slide, you can see that we want to bridge two very distant elements of the world. So by one side, here on the right of this slide, we have multiple network providers. So we have operators with Wi-Fi hotspots, we have convention centers, we have airports, we have universities, we have schools, we have retail shops, all have their own Wi-Fi networks. And then by the other side, we have a series of entities that they have identities. So all of us as users, we are registered with our mobile operator, with our cable operator, with our ISPs, if it's the case. I'm pretty sure all of us, we have multiple brand loyalty programs. We have multiple devices with multiple credentials, either from Android or from iOS, Apple, or Microsoft, that already have some type of credential that identify all of us individually. And what this federation wants to do is somehow to help these two worlds to work together. And this will, in our view, will optimize this Wi-Fi and cellular coexistence, and will open up the opportunity to deliver new operator services and to embrace new models and new opportunities, either new services or new devices that can be pursued. And this last slide, somehow, if you have curiosity about it, it's really to identify the different players that will have a relevant role on this open roaming ecosystem. So we have, as I said, the identity providers, we have the Wi-Fi network providers, we have a series of entities that can help to interconnect these two worlds. And of course, we have in green all of us as end users being able to connect in a more easy and secure way to the Wi-Fi. So as a summary, definitely 5G is a step change in the communications performance. Will change and will open up many opportunities. 5G, in our view, will be delivery by using multiple technologies. Of course, 5G new radio will be one, but other ones will be used as well, including Wi-Fi. So more than ever, this heterogeneous network approach is a key element to optimize connectivity. Exciting new cases will be possible. So you saw some examples that I shared, but others like autonomous vehicle, robotics will come up very strongly. Wi-Fi, as I said, Wi-Fi 6 and 5G plays a critical role on delivering this 5G vision. And just a final message, innovation will come up when this technology is deployed, and many use cases will be delivered, as I shared with these two small examples that we have been working on the Alliance. So hope you enjoyed this short introduction, and really looking forward for the discussion and to your questions. Thank you so much, and back to you, Dario.
Well, thank you, Tiago. And let me tell everybody that thanks for taking through the overview of your slides, but the slides will be available afterwards as well. There is so much information in there, so that's great too. But it turns out that I didn't have to ask for people's questions. We got them straight away. So before I start with my set of questions, I might ask you and Stein to answer on what people have already wrote to us. And do please write them. There's a Q&A button, but also there's a chat button. I would look at both. So wherever you want to use, make sure that you send us your question. But starting with Sudendu, if I pronounce your name correctly, Sudendu. Interesting question, which is the EU is promoting the use of campus setup with 5G in factories. Now, does that compete with the scope of Wi-Fi6, which is more relevant for limited range applications? Start with Tiago maybe, and then we'll go to Stein. So how, the campus application of 5G and the Wi-Fi6 application meet?
Yeah, that's a very, very relevant question. Before I answer directly to the question, let me just give one other data point. European Union is promoting as well, for example, free Wi-Fi. So they have a Wi-Fi for EU program with more than 9,000 municipalities that were funded by the European Commission to deploy Wi-Fi. So there is different streams. Answering to your questions, as I said before, I think there are some use cases where 5G will be much more applicable, either because the type of device is used or the type of latency that is necessary, the type of applications, the type of services that needs to be applied. Some enterprises will go with 5G, no doubt about it. But at the same time, there are some others that will go with Wi-Fi6, or they can even go with other technologies, because it varies a lot on the specific use case that they want to solve. And what solves one modern manufacturing company, regardless of the case, or a factory, may not solve a similar factory in a different sector, because the type of, as I said, devices, use cases, equipment is different.
Oh, thank you, Tiago. And the same question to Stein. I mean, a bit of gray in between, but where, and maybe you can even tell us a bit more widely what you expect in terms of coexistence of Wi-Fi and 5G from your experience as well. But on campus, starting from the question, how do you can see a decision being made between one and the other?
Well, I think this is actually one of the most interesting questions, because this use case, we'll call it industrial use or campus or whatever, it's one of the areas there where operators probably need, and I talk about mobile operators, they probably need to sort that out somehow, because they probably cannot make any return on investment if they only focus on consumers and even more broadband smartphones, like very well. And everyone bets on industrial use, and this is one of the cases with URLLC and in the industrial use for manufacturing, for instance, or any other thing. But the issue, I think, is for operators is that they don't really know how to work with enterprises very well. I mean, and there are many other players that are much better at that than mobile operators. So this enterprise environment with industrial use cases, I think, is definitely an area where Wi-Fi6, without the OpenRoaming topic, can be quite competitive, I think. But it all depends on what kind of solutions the industries need, and who can actually provide those solutions for them.
Great. Does that mean that there are going to be multiple players, but mobile operators could be one of those offering a Wi-Fi solution, as they do, right? So we have already a plethora of operators out there, but they could be simple LAN-like presentation or something more complicated and a hybrid service. Much will have to be decided. Before, and on that questions, I have a couple of things pending on my tongue, but I want to answer another question that came to us, and this time from Derek. So I'll start from you, Stein. I don't know if you have an opinion there, but this is one of the topic very close to our heart, at least, which is identity. Derek asked, how does it work if a user has multiple identity providers? A user could have Google, Samsung account, etc. So they're asking, how would that work? Now, Stein, there was something in the presentation from Tiago, so I should really ask him, but I'll start with you. Have you seen these as an obstacle in implementation in general before, identity?
Yeah, I was going to say that this is probably a question for Tiago, but let me have a go anyway, because I think it's about how OpenRoaming works, and I think that's the way I've been looking at it. I have not studied OpenRoaming in detail, but what I would assume is that anyone can take the role, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tiago, but anyone can take any role in the OpenRoaming ecosystem. Some will be identity providers, and some will be network providers, and some will be brokers or carriers, or whatever you call them in the mobile world, or roaming hubs. Identity providers, if that can be a mobile operator, it can be Google, it can be anyone, right? That anyone that has an identity, which actually equals having billing functionality, I think is. And that's what it is. And that's where you have a relation with a customer, and based on that identity and that billing functionality, which you may use or may not use in terms of cashing in. But so I would assume that an identity provider on a national level will connect a number of hotspots to their service provision, which will probably happen seamlessly. And I don't know how OpenRoaming works exactly. But the issue, I guess, which has been difficult in the cellular industry is roaming. It's very seamless and useful for an operator, not for a customer, because they don't see anything, it just works. But for an operator, it's very complicated because you need to have roaming agreements, and every operator needs to have a roaming agreement, whether it's bilateral or multilateral or through roaming hubs. So it's really complicated to set up, and actually it needs a revolution. So between identity providers, I assume something similar will happen in OpenRoaming, that they need to have agreements between identity providers, and then it will work. But I would assume that an identity provider just connects hotspots to its network, whether he owns them himself or whether it's through other parties. But yeah, so it's a complicated scenario. But actually, how it works within OpenRoaming, I think that's probably a better question for Tiago.
We'll let Tiago answering for that one, but first I can't wait to say that, you know, Tiago, through those words, you've opened a bit of a Pandora's box for METTIS, because the identity provider function for the last 6 years has been one of the key topics for, you know, digital transformation. As Stein was saying, is a mobile operator one of the key identity provider? Is it somebody else externally? Or could be one of the OTT services that Derek was pointing out. I mean, key questions out there. Now, everybody's waiting. Tiago, how do you see that happening in future and within Wi-Fi?
This is one critical question for, in my view, for the future of connectivity, because even for the future Wi-Fi, I don't expect that the future Wi-Fi is about open access networks. So we are going to, sooner or later, that is going to be over. Well, first of all, OpenRoaming comes from the angle that we don't want to oblige anyone to work with anyone. So when you join the federation, you have the ability, regardless if you are a network or if you are a provider, and regardless if you are a mobile operator or a sports stadium or Google or anyone else, you have the ability to say, okay, I will work with the entire federation, or I will work just with a small group of the federation. So they have that ability to choose their partners. And then we as users, we have basically two mechanisms that we can implement. So one mechanism is I can choose my own credential. So I can choose, I will use the credential of my mobile operator, and I choose, for example, Google or Facebook or Apple or Samsung credential. And then manually I can decide, okay, I connect with one or I connect with the other one if I want. Or I can even define that by default, I connect with my mobile operator. At the same time, a federation like OpenRoaming starts to open up something that I really enjoy and I think is lacking on the Wi-Fi world, that is, it opens up the door for policy. And for the first time, the members of one identity can decide, okay, I have Tiago trying to connect to this coffee shop, but because I can check in advance the quality of the network of the coffee shop, I can decide, well, maybe it's not good for Tiago to connect to that coffee shop because he's my premium customer. He has a contract with me. Imagine if I'm a mobile operator, so I don't want to give them a best effort service. And that starts to open up a very interesting case, special for the mobile operators, that they can combine the Wi-Fi with their cellular services. So that solves somehow how to manage the different identities. The other topic that I think it's very important that Stein raised is this roaming, international roaming. If we believe that is already complicated for the mobile industry, so, and I think we have more or less 1,000 mobile operators in the entire world. For Wi-Fi, we have thousands or hundreds of thousands, not to say millions, or dozens of millions of networks and potential identities, or well, more dozens of millions networks and some thousand identities. And that creates that the typical model that has been used by the mobile industry cannot be replicated into Wi-Fi. We need some level of automation to make these players in the Wi-Fi world to start to do roaming between themselves. And part of the challenge is not only the number, but as well the expertise. We cannot ask for a small coffee shop in our street or a restaurant in our street that suddenly is an expert in technology and telecoms and be able to connect and have a contract with a mobile operator and somehow be in equal terms to negotiate whatever he needs to negotiate with a mobile operator. So we need automation. So we need platforms that can integrate those players into the telecoms industry without being a barrier. I think it works very well. The international roaming for the mobile I think is a case study. Because all the players, they have the same level of expertise, same level of capacity and resources. But when we go to the Wi-Fi industry, it's a very completely different world. And we need to solve that with automation.
I know that time is already running fast, but do ask your questions now if you want it to be answered. Meanwhile, I have my couple of questions that I want to ask. And the first one is, in your presentation, Wi-Fi 6. Personally, I love the fact that we are streamlining of a simple number to remember now. It's easier as a mnemonic. But a key question for the type of people that listen at math, which is, well, we're going to make money out of it. When is it going to be available? And let's say for our B2B players, the one that will say, when will I be able to buy the first equipment, so to speak, to deploy? Some of the consumers level, they might ask you, how long is it going to take from your experience to have it into devices, smartphones, homes, etc. So Tiago, that's a question.
Yeah, very, very good question. So I think for the enterprise market, the major manufacturers like Cisco, Ruckus, Aruba, and others, they already have equipment ready. Normally they start with the high range models, and I believe all those are available. I already tested the equipment from multiple manufacturers, so I think that is solved. For all of us as residential Wi-Fi, that is depending a lot on the operators, and many of our members are working on implementing Wi-Fi 6 on the networks. But as you can imagine, it takes always a little bit longer because they need to do all the certifications, all the compliance, all the testing to guarantee that when they deploy Wi-Fi 6 in a very large scale, in millions of hours, then everything needs to be tested. So that will probably take a little bit longer. In terms of devices, I'm very pleased to share that all the major manufacturers like Apple, Samsung, LG, they all provide already Wi-Fi 6 ready devices, and even Intel and has already chipsets for the laptops.
So would I be wrong to say that it is a question of months if you want to have a B2B? Apologies for the simplification, and maybe a bit more than a year to look at some of the critical mass in Wi-Fi 6 for the consumer?
I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think for the B2B, I think it's now. Anyone can just contact their supply, they will have it. For the B2C, yes, probably 6 to we'll start the first announcements and large deployments.
And I'd like to compare that with the 5G, which you say it is a bit of a game to say, are they competing? Are they complementary? But Stein, back to what you expect. What are you seeing on 5G as well? Is that similarly taking a bit long to get the coverage and the operators roll out?
Yeah, I'm just checking if I'm muted, but I'm not muted. So no, I think, I mean, we have, even last year we saw a lot of device manufacturers coming out with 5G phones, and what you see from operators is, I think it must be 100, 200 operators that have launched already some form of 5G today. At least I saw statistics saying at least 100. And it's going on. But what I do see is that the use cases that operators are focusing on so far are consumer oriented, and they are smartphones, and they are fixed wireless access, which is also consumer oriented, if you like. The long-term promises of 5G with low latency and massive IoT, etc. That's something that is not yet there. So, which actually again brings me to the point I mentioned before, is that if Wi-Fi 6 is going to get anywhere on the enterprise market, I think the window is now, because you can say the whole industry is a slow industry. It's like an elephant, it takes time to start, but when it starts, it's hard to stop. And it will happen. There's a lot of stakeholders there. All the operators have spent a lot of money. The regulators have cashed in a lot of money, and it's happening. So more operators all across the world are launching and rolling out at full speed. And if you see in the US, the operators have come very far. In Korea, the operators have come very far. In China, they're coming very far. And a lot of other places, but the industrial use cases we talked about before, they have not really started yet. There are some experiments going on with between operators and vertical industries, but I don't think they have figured out the business models yet. There will be a lot of work needed to be done on SLAs, and it's a long story, I think, before that's going on. But that will be the same for Wi-Fi, except that probably the more solution-oriented companies might be better at it when they have Wi-Fi to play with.
So let me probably go back to something that Tiago was also pointing out in his presentation, and which is one of the key questions of, we see capacity, we understand speed by now, there's going to be higher speeds. But what about this question of latency? If I am there building a service right now, what do you think that I should be looking at, or what kind of great experiences, improvements, great services we would see now, thanks to these two networks, the 5G and the Wi-Fi 6, bringing so much improvements in latency itself? What does it mean for a developer out there? Who wants to take it? Stein, Tiago?
I can make a general comment, I think, and that goes for latency, and it goes for how broad the band is as well. So the broadband aspect and the latency aspect. I think the broadband is one thing, but it's also important to think about how long the broadband is. Because you have a backhaul and you have a core network, and And so actually the broadband might be much less if you take that into account, whether it's 5G or Wi-Fi. So actually the backhaul provider and core network provider is also a key in this area. Yeah, have a local network though, it's maybe different. You know, if you have an edge computing type thing and you are having a campus solution, then you can handle much more locally, and then you will not have that latency, and you will probably not have that issue with the broadband either, because it can be handled locally.
And Tiago, would you like to add something on latency and the business potential?
No, definitely that's a very important feature that will improve a lot both with 5G and Wi-Fi 6. And regardless of the technology that we decide to use, the latency will be a key outcome of those technologies. And some of these use cases that I shared, so being able to do virtual reality in a factory or doing virtual reality in an office, that will be awesome. That is something that probably will be very demanding to do it today with the technology that we have, but probably will be common in a few years from now. And those new technologies are the ones that will enable that, or the same with autonomous car, being able to have cars that can self-drive us anywhere and they can communicate to each other. So that's bring another level of requirements to these networks that we don't have today. And I think all these examples are the way that latency and the speed can help create new business cases and new monetization models, both for the mobile operators. I think mobile operators are I can say that for me, they are in the first row to be part of this new revolution, but other players, I believe that many other players will look to this ecosystem as and this technology with a monetization strategy.
Well, fantastic. We have time for one more question before I'll ask Stein to give some of his conclusion remarks, just as Tiago open up. But I wanted to ask you a question. I've been stolen the opportunity by Andrea, but actually ask a much better question for this same topic, which was reading out his question from Andrea. In terms of security and data protection, is there any unique model or regulation adopted when user moves from Wi-Fi to cellular and vice versa, when it comes to user data application, etc.? So the heterogeneous network, which Tiago was referring to as well, it means an heterogeneous experience. Almost you jump from one network to another, but security needs to be end-to-end sometimes. Challenges get bigger by the day. So I'll start with Tiago. I mean, this question really probably is firstly aimed at you. How can we provide security in Wi-Fi and cellular? Is there a unique model?
Yeah, Dario, that's why we in WPI, we really reinforce the vision that many mobile operators should look to Wi-Fi as one more radio access network. No different from 3G, LTE, or 5G. And they just need to have one more that is Wi-Fi. And many of our members, including large operators like, I don't know, AT&T or Korea Telecom, or even Deutsche Telekom, they already provide services that you can authenticate on the Wi-Fi using your SIM card. So you have an identity that is super secure. No one really knows what the secret behind that, because it's completely on the chip, and provides a super secure environment. And that's the way that we believe this technology will become much more secure, especially on the Wi-Fi. So we are very proponent that everything that is related with technology like EP authentication, including the SIM card authentication, will provide a much more security on the networks. And as I said on my slides, I believe that sooner or later, this concept of sharing passwords, this idea of sharing yellow papers in the office with passwords for Wi-Fi, this will disappear, because all of us will have ability to have a strong credential, either from my mobile operator or some other credential that will identify myself. And I can be identified in my house, in my office, or in any place that has a network.
Great.
And mobile operators once more are on the forefront to take this advantage of this.
So that must be great to have a starting point with a hierarchical view, but at least these are mobile operators out there. So people have got a model that can roll out, and looking at Wi-Fi as an additional delivery mechanism almost. Well, you know, so I hope that answer, Andreas, certainly did answer mine. A few more questions on how it will be done, but that's more for next webinars, I think. I would like to say only a few words to say how exciting already seems that somehow looking back at 10 years ago, where half of the things we're talking about wasn't even close to reality, this seamless experience which is starting to come up with Wi-Fi, with 5G, with 4G, and the mobile experience of the wireless operator as well. So very exciting.
Can I just make a quick comment on the same topic? 3GPP has defined non-3GPP access as a radio access network for 5G. So that includes any type of Wi-Fi. And if you're looking at this from a mobile operator point of view, you are an identity provider already, and you have a security. And so if it's integrated in the 5G offering, it should be okay already, because security happens on top of the radio access.
So great.
So that should be okay. But if you're something else in a mobile operator, then you would have to work on your own security mechanisms.
Well, Stein, I said I wanted to ask you a few of the generic points to conclude the day. What's your view on the future for the next mobility networks for the next few years, WiFi6 and 5G? What do you imagine?
Well, I think I agree with what Thiago said initially, is that Wi-Fi6 will make Wi-Fi better and 5G will make cellular better. So, and they will coexist. I guess, and you can take a look at the technology characteristics and capabilities, and one is better than the other in some areas and the other in other areas. So that's not so important, I think, at the end of the day, because what really matters is business models and the commercial aspects around how both these technologies are going to work and how they are going to fit together. And I think there will be new players with OpenRoaming coming in, I'm sure. I think Wi-Fi6 will be a good competitor to 5G on industrial use cases. If not, operators manage to get their act together, they can do it with Wi-Fi6 as well. So, you know, they can do that. They can also do OpenRoaming. But it might open up for other players to compete in that area. On the consumer side with smartphones, I think it will be a continuation of what we have today, I guess. And both will coexist, and both will work together, I'm quite sure. But the two technologies, Wi-Fi and cellular, are inherently quite different, but they might have some overlapping use cases, and especially, I think, in industrial use case area. But yeah, just maybe one more thing. One of the things that is considered by operators a lot today is private networks, private 5G networks, and some regulators are allocating spectrum to private networks for 5G networks. But what we do see is that that's a little bit too early at the moment for the enterprises to actually go for that with 5G. So, and the operators are probably not ready either. But again, these are the industrial use cases I was talking about, and so there might be even a relation here with private 5G networks or private networks in general.
Well, fantastic, and thanks, Stein. I personally just have a comment for the future, probably future webinar. Some of our members from the entertainment, the content area, are particularly excited, whether it's 5G or Wi-Fi, on the potential for the virtual reality, the gaming, etc. I think at some point we will have to ask them more directly of what they think and what they love. So we'll see what they will say. But some of the other expertise, as you were saying, in industrial solutions, we're still waiting to see a bit more of the results, but they're already Wi-Fi6 experiments, there's 5G, so there's lots of happening, and I think we'll have to touch base on this topic pretty soon. But in terms of a starting point, I'd like to thank Tiago and Stein for the great work you've both done to give us a bit more of a flavor of what's happening out there. And I think thanks to all of you that have joined today and your questions. And if you are watching in one of our repeats on our on-demand services, don't worry, you can still send us questions. info@mobileecosystemforum.com. We'll make sure we address them. So I'd like to thank you again. Tiago, thank you. I hope we'll see more of a WBA. This is an open invitation from METT. Do use our community to tell us more of what you're doing. And Stein as well, thank you again for being joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stein. Thank you, Dario. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, and see you soon again here at the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Bye-bye.